Others will drop in. Thank you, Joanna. Well done. I knew I would forget to record. So welcome to our inaugural Celebrate and Inspire Student Showcase event. My name is Anne Leyburn, and I'm the manager of the Community Research Initiative and have developed it alongside Joanna, who you can see as part of the panel as well. So we affectionately know the Community Research Initiative as CRIS. It's much less of a mouthful, and at UCL we're very used to acronyms. The clue is in the name. So you may well hear us talking about CRIS as we go through proceedings. So, oh, I've lost my mouse. There we go. So, really warm welcome. Normally, I would be welcoming you to UCL, and this is Gordon Street. This is where we are normally, and I'm part of a team, and it's a fantastic group of people. It's a real team effort. And I work with Joanna Socha, who's here today, as I said, and also she's helped build the service this year, but has also has been a master's student while she's been working with me, and so has really brought some lived experience to the development of CRIS. Also got John, who is my manager and leads the volunteering service here at UCL, which is where we belong. And that means we sit alongside our colleagues who have really good established relationships with the volunteering community sector, and a little bit more about that later. But yeah, John's the best. And finally, of note, we work very closely with Max, who leads all the kind of systems and IT stuff in the union, and has really patiently and expertly guided Joanna and I through building our online presence and our system and workflow that will really help us work with more and more students and more effectively work with people. So obviously we're not at Gordon Street today. We are on Zoom, and that does actually mean we've got pushing 100 people today, which I'm not sure I'd have been able to get a big enough room at UCL at this time of the year. And also with current campus guidance, we wouldn't have all been able to be together. And we've also got some international people dialing in and people from over the UK. So let's celebrate all the benefits that Zoom can bring. Just a little bit of housekeeping. Feel free to use the chat function in Zoom as a kind of meetup kind of function. So we've got some organizations on the call today. Feel free to pop in the chat what organization you're representing, what kind of work you do, what you're interested in. And also the kind of majority of people today are students, new master's students at UCL. So welcome to UCL, possibly welcome to London, and possibly welcome to the UK, in fact. So please do introduce yourself on the chat. Let us know what course that you're studying this year. You could well have course mates who are in the call today that you didn't know about or haven't met yet. So please do use the chat to connect. Don't put any questions in the chat. I'm not going to be able to monitor the chat while I'm kind of doing all the bits and bobs behind the scenes. So please do, beside the chat function, there's a button that says Q&A, and please put your questions in there. And that can be questions about CRIS itself, about you accessing CRIS. It could also be questions to our panelists or our student speakers. We're not going to have so much of a live Q&A component today, but we'd love to gather up your questions, and these will be used to inform our kind of web pages and communications better and develop our frequently asked questions resources, but also we'll use your questions to develop our induction sessions that are running next week. There's 3 that you can choose from. So your questions will be answered, it just won't necessarily be in the session today, but please do use that Q&A function because that will really help me. And finally, in one of our sessions today, hopefully, possibly, if Claire's able to make it, is we're going to use a little polling tool, which is called Mentimeter or Menti. So you can find mentimeter.com, or you can find Menti as an app on your mobile device. Joanna is going to share the link to Mentimeter, and also this is the code. We'll share that again close to the time, but it's just one question and one code that you would need to use. but just to be aware of that, and while you're kind of listening to what's happening, then, you know, please do try and find Menti. Okay, so I think that is most of the housekeeping things. So hopefully most of you will have received the online brochure that we made. A few people have signed up just this morning, so you may have missed that. Today's agenda is we've got some fantastic keynotes that are the people who are really experienced in this way of working and will be sharing their different perspectives. We're going to go into the student showcase, where we've got some fantastic students who have just completed their masters and also have worked through me with an external organisation to collaborate on their dissertation project. So that's the kind of main purpose of us being here today, to inspire you guys as new students and hear from their experiences. I'm going to introduce you briefly to some research that we're actually part of to put this in the kind of wider UCL context. And then finally, I'm delighted that Alan Thompson, who is one of the senior members of senior management at UCL, who has the unenviable title of Vice Provost, but essentially it's about London's UCL's place in London and working with and for and among London and our communities, and that includes the voluntary sector. So Alan's going to come and join us towards the end with some kind of concluding remarks and UCL's kind of commitment to this way of working. So there's a lot, you're going to hear a lot today. There's a lot of links, there's a lot of ways to get involved. This is all in the brochure, which has been shared in the chat, and any links will be in follow-up emails, etc. So please don't worry too much about capturing all that. Just sit back and let it wash over you, the wonderful experiences that our students have had, and also our keynote to celebrate this way of working. So don't worry too much if you miss links and things, they will be shared. So although today is all about hearing from students who were just like you this time last year, didn't know what CRIS was and wanted to take part, I thought we should just talk about CRIS, and it would be sensible for me just to tell you what it is and what we do to give you the real context of then the students' reflections. So at the heart of CRIS really is the student experience, and the kind of word dissertation will be looming over you all. A major part of the master's year is your dissertation, a kind of independent but supervised piece of research. And we really know that dissertations really matter to students. It's consistently the least satisfactory element of the master's student experience. We know this from surveying, and this is why CRIS kind of exists. So we can help with developing those research ideas and questions with different people than you necessarily would normally come across within UCL. So we put dissertations really at the center of what we do, and we inspire you to do things differently. And that is to develop your ideas and to think and to listen to other perspectives outside of the university. And in our case, we think other experts and other knowledge that's really great for students to connect with is the charity or voluntary and community sector. So we inspire you to do things a little bit different with your dissertation. And we do that by connecting you. You know, we're really lucky at UCL to be embedded within London. We're in Camden, one of the north boroughs of London, and we connect you through CRIS to a really diverse, exciting city of experts, like I say, that you wouldn't come across within the university kind of metaphorical walls. So that's kind of why we exist. And you know, how do we do this, or what do you get with CRIS? Well, we work in a kind of variety of ways, and the commitment that as students and organisations that you give to CRIS is really what fits into your schedules. And we're a little bit of a kind of pick us up as you need us service, I suppose. So there's kind of a menu of options, and you can use us and work with us as and when it suits you. So as I mentioned, there's kind of we have an online presence, and so your portal into us really is to use the online sign up. At the moment, that's for students, and that's live online. There will be an organisational sign up as well. And here, by signing up, you won't miss anything. You'll essentially be on our news kind of list of people to communicate with. So you will access kind of one-to-one support with me. So that's not about your specific topic or dissertation, but about one-to-one support in thinking about this different way of working and collaborating and meeting other people. So you can have access to me and one-to-one support, lots of useful communications from us, although we won't flood your inboxes, don't worry. We do know from master students' feedback that your inboxes will be flooded. There's a lot of content that comes out of your courses, so we don't want to add to that stress. We do offer skills development opportunities, and this year we've structured it into term 1. So again, it's not about your specific dissertation, but it's about skilling up with the different, increasing your confidence and helping you think about working with someone else if that's something that interests you. And related to that is our, we've got some, those are live, those skills development sessions, and we've also got not live or asynchronous, as UCL likes to call it, recorded, sorry, I don't know why it does that, recorded content that we will have up online from kind of the next couple of weeks that complement those practical sessions. And that's to kind of introduce you, what is the voluntary sector? You might be coming from a country that this is all new to you. So we have them. We have a digital community notice board, which is somewhere where our community partners and citizens can post ideas or research questions or projects. And in term 2, as students, you will be able to access this notice board and make an expression of interest, if you like, that you like that idea, it fits with what you want to do. And then I can help broker the new relationship and new conversation for you. And finally, we do a couple of networking events, again, hopefully in face-to-face, in person, but may well be online, which has worked. We did that in 2020. Okay, so I'm just going to stop sharing for now. So without further ado, really, I'd like to get started with our keynote speakers. Now that you know a little bit about what CRIS is and what we do, I'm delighted to say that we've been joined by Jim Onyemenam, who was the postgraduate sabbatical officer, which is an elected position at the Students' Union, representing the needs and advocating for postgraduate students. And Jim did this through 2019 and was re-elected in 2020. And he'll be ably succeeded by Victoria Mackay, who, students, this is your new postgraduate sabbatical officer. So get in touch with Vicky if you would like. We've also got Caroline Rouse or Rouse. I didn't get an answer from Gemma when I asked how I pronounce your surname. I'm sorry, Caroline. Caroline's with us today as part of the panel. She's a co-founder of an organisation called Compost, which is a fantastic umbrella support organisation in a way for the voluntary and community sector within Newham, which is another borough in London, which will have UCL presence. And finally, Muki Haklay from UCL, member of staff at UCL and an absolute hero of citizen science and involving and working with citizens in research. And Muki will talk about that more. So what I would like to do, unfortunately, Jim can't actually physically be with us today. So I am going to, he did kindly record a little message for us. So I'm just going to share this for you now.
Hi everyone, my name's Jim and I really wish I could be with you today. Sadly, my work commitments have finally caught up with me. I am somewhere outside Guildford working on an ad for Adidas. If I say any more, the next video I send will be from a courtroom. So instead, I decided to just join you guys for a video. And yeah, I am so happy to have been invited to this, largely because CRIS was a big part of the work I did as a student officer back when I was the postgraduate students officer between 2019 and 2021. Being a postgraduate students officer or students officer in general is phenomenal, particularly with postgraduate students, because it's generally such a tough thing. In fact, being a master's student, because you're only in London for a year, and there's a huge challenge to juggle your academic commitments whilst making the most of UCL and of your time in London. And it's even harder during a global pandemic. It's harder when we're in and out of lockdowns all the time, when you have to tap in and check into wherever you're going into, where you have to maintain social distancing whilst you're trying to maintain a social network in a brand new city. And one of the best avenues to achieve this that I worked with and labored on was CRIS. I worked on loads of stuff to try and improve the student experience, and a great student experience is one where you feel inherently connected to your community. You're not just learning from your university, but you're also feeding back. You feel like you have a place in where you are and a valued member of that society. You can achieve this through art societies or music societies, or, well, my personal favorite, the film society, or you can achieve this through volunteering. And what CRIS did was it actually allowed the volunteering work that master students did to be integrated with their academic achievements. It literally solved that problem of juggling your academic commitments and being a part of a society, being a fundamental part of that society. And CRIS was such an incredible thing, and all the students who worked through CRIS in the 2 years that I was postgraduate students officer have gone on to do phenomenal things since. And I really wish I was there today to see the stuff that are on show today. For any incoming master students watching this, I implore you to really take part in CRIS. It's a phenomenal avenue to do some great volunteering work, to stay connected to the London community and the UCL community that you're a part of for the next year or two, and to learn more and see more about London, to see a side of this beautiful city that not many people do get to see. Yeah, that's me. I'm sure there's some details around me on the programs. My email, now that I'm out of UCL, is somewhere there. And please feel free to reach out if you have any questions. If you want to be in touch, I always check my emails. And again, I'm really sorry I'm not there in person. Thank you so much for inviting me. And I hope this little I've been able to say has set off this event in the right direction. There's some other amazing students lined up to speak, and I'm sure they have even more to say. Thank you all so much, and have a great day.
Great. Thank you, Jim. In absence, I think I'm not sure you have managed to join the call, but thank you so much. So I'd love to turn. That was our kind of student perspective. I'd love to turn to Caroline now. And I'd like to invite you, thank you, to unmute. And I think you're going to bring to us the kind of community perspective on that side of things in terms of this kind of university community exchange. So thank you very much, Caroline.
Okay, I don't have slides, I just have me. So just explore the background while I'm talking. So I've got a little bit of time, and what I want to cover is something about not-for-profits, voluntary community groups. One of the difficulties is that they have so much terminology. So if we lump them all together and say not-for-profits, because basically that's what they do. They don't exist to make a profit. And then something about some of the worries that organisations have when they find out that they're going to be working with people from a university, and then some of the reasons why it's so good to happen. So that's what I want to cover. As Anne said in the introduction, I'm from an organisation called Compost, and the reason we're called Compost is that we help groups grow. We don't actually do things ourselves. We put a bit of goodness into an organisation and help it grow. So that could be helping them set up the right structure for what they want to do. It could be helping them with their governance. It could be helping them with their fundraising. So if I start with a little bit about not-for-profits, they come from a very different place to almost any other type of organisation. So you'll get the public sector organisations that are there to do things that have been set by the government as a good thing to happen. You'll get the private sector organisations who, while some of them are very honourable and others aren't, they're still basically there to make a profit for their shareholders. And then you get the not-for-profits, and they've been set up by people that have a passion. They've seen that something's missing in the world or in their own community, and they have a passion about that, and they will set up an organisation to meet that need, to sort of address that passion. They don't have to have any qualifications. They just have to have the want and the need and the space to do something. They often start with people that don't even get paid. They start from volunteers. And they grow from there, but the people that have started them don't know anything about business and that. So that's where we engage with them. They come along and they go, we've noticed this. We want to do something about it. How do we go about doing it? How do we get registered? What legal aspects do we have to follow? So you will find that voluntary and community organisations, charities, not-for-profits, whatever people call themselves, will be as varied as the number of needs that you can imagine. And they will come from all walks of life to set that up. They will usually have very interesting backgrounds, but it's all lived in experience. And they come in as many shapes and sizes as you can possibly imagine. A good way of thinking about them is think about the retail sector. You've got the great big shops like sort of Selfridges or Tesco's or Sainsbury's. Then you get the smaller franchises. There might be 2 or 3 of those. And then there's the little tiny one-man corner shops. You will find all of those in the voluntary and community sector. You'll have the great big ones, the international ones like Oxfam. You'll have the British ones like English Heritage and National Trust. And then you'll have the small ones that just work in a certain area. And then you'll get the really tiny ones that are just working in their own neighbourhood and that. So that's a little bit about the not-for-profits. When a university approaches a not-for-profit, there is an element of, oh, do I want to do this? And some of the things that organisations have told me are at the top of their concerns about this is, will I be able to communicate with academics? I'm not one. How am I going to talk to them? And will they understand what I'm saying, what my organisation does? And will they have any idea what my beneficiaries, what the people that we do our services for are like? You know, because they're the people that are in need. And some of you may find that if you're having a difficulty, everything goes out the window. So you could have somebody who was perfectly able to communicate their need, and then something went wrong and they're needing help by that charity. But actually everything else goes wrong. It's not a single person. So they're worried about that. Will they be able to use what you give them and what they learn from the experience? Or will it not be practical enough for them to carry on and spread out through their organisation? And will there be an element of understanding and a sympathy between the two organisations? And that's some of the concerns that people find when they first start. But it works, and it really does work. You know, I mean, Anne told you in the introduction that there are a lot of experiences, and I'm sure you'll hear from all the students how fulfilling and amazing it is. So it really is worth doing something about it. But it takes a bit of hard work. There needs to be lots of questions, lots of discussions. There needs to be an exploration about each other's worlds. There's a saying that people sometimes say, you need to walk in their moccasins to understand their life. And that's very much about how you get into an organisation. You need to find out what they do, how they do it, and why they do it that way. And that will be really easy for them to answer because it's their passion. It's what they do, and they're really excited about why they do it and what they do it for. But you need to learn their language. As Anne said, UCL loves acronyms. Every area of work has an awful lot of shorthand and jargon. There's no such thing as a silly question, just ask. Just because they've worked all their life using these phrases doesn't mean that everybody in the world understands them. So lots of questions, lots of discussions, appreciation of each other's knowledge, because there are different types of knowledge, and the people that work every single day with a group of people that are facing a need have a huge wealth of knowledge about what happens to people when that thing goes wrong, and how you can talk to people and help them find remedies and that. And after all this discussion, you will both change. The organisation will change a bit because it's had engagement with you, and you will change a bit because you've had engagement with the organisation and hopefully some of the beneficiaries. And you will find some common ground, and you'll be able to do amazing things. So when I've talked to organisations that have got to the end of the process, the first thing they say was, that was astonishing. I haven't met any organisation that is sorry they signed up for anything like this. They now understand why they do things and why things happen, because they've looked at what they do under a microscope, and they've unpicked, why does this happen? How do we do this? How do we do it better? And every organisation comes away with something that will have been co-produced, and that makes it better. It could be a tool, it could be a way of working, it could be a frame of mind, but by the action of talking through this and discussing it, you've co-produced things. And the other thing that they get from working with universities is they get something that gives them a bit of almost like the moral high ground. They're able to go to their funders and say, well, actually, this isn't something we made up. We made it together with the academic world, and it's actually been proven, and it's worked, and it's got a level of gravitas and depth to it because we worked on it together with the academic world. And funders actually think, well, they're not just Mrs. Bloggs from down the road who's having a go at doing something. It's much more than that. So I'd really encourage you to do this. It's such a window onto another world, and we find it's really valuable for our organisations. So good luck.
Thank you so much, Caroline. That was a fantastic opening for this, and it's just brilliant to hear your perspective. And aside from Jim, I wanted your perspective in there first, because that's what we're doing, is listening to other perspectives in CRIS, and that's what we're encouraging students to do. So thank you so much. Muki, I'd love to invite you to unmute and share your screen, hopefully, if that's all set up when you're ready. But Muki, please take the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And to all of you who are new to UCL, welcome. You should be able to see this now, my screen. And I wanted to kind of explain the perspective of a researcher that gets into this area of engaging with communities, and also explain what it is. So this is me, but in 1998, 23 years ago, about that time of the year, actually. And what was going on is that I started doing my PhD research at UCL after a lot of getting lost and thinking, what exactly am I supposed to do? I got very interested in the issue of public access to environmental information, which is actually something that I continue to do since. And there is a way to do that without engaging with people, just running survey and other things. But it was very clear personally for me that you can't really understand what people want from environmental information and from using information that is provided by authorities without actually asking them, without engaging with communities. And I was lucky to work with people in the Department of Geography at UCL with vast experience in going out and engaging with different people. And those are community members from Wandsworth, where now there is the whole huge project next to the Battersea Power Station. And we're discussing the type of information that they can see. And ever since, it's actually something that engaging communities is, in a way, not a choice. I have to do that. There is no other way that I can carry out my research because of the way that I've selected to focus on specific questions. The story of this is actually going further back. So you can think about histories about different ways in which people participate and engage with processes. So this is one of the most cited concepts within the social sciences about participation and engagement of people in the process. And notice that this is now over 50 years old. And it's talking that you can just not give people information or just inform them, but actually where you want to get to is to get to a citizen control over decision making. And you need to kind of think about what's the right thing to do. And academics, a lot of time, tend to follow the lower bits just because they are very comfortable. And this concept, which became to known as Ahrenstein ladder, because it was created by Sherry Rubin Ahrenstein in that period, led to what I sometimes call the Ahrenstein ladder factory of a lot of people using the same concept in many areas. And I'm guilty of participating in this ladder factory just as much in kind of thinking about different ways in which people can participate in scientific processes, which is what I'm doing now. This is what citizen science mean, that we're basically opening up the scientific process and saying that anyone, regardless of their literacy, regardless of their background, can actively participate in the scientific process. They can ask questions, they can collect the data, they can analyze, they can do things with the information. They won't necessarily come up with an academic publication at the end of it, but they will do something that is important for them and for their communities. And in some cases, and those are the cases that I'm a lot of time focusing now, we're actually saying the whole process needs to be run by community members and not by us. And we sometimes call it extreme citizen science, as this is as far as you can get with this concept. And this leads to all sorts of dealing with problems, like, for example, this is now, again, 10 years old with early smartphone, but enabling communities to collect data around noise. And communities around Heathrow, for example, were very keen to record the experience that they have. So it's not just that they are complaining about the noise, but they actually have a record evidence for the information that it is. And we all have those instruments in our pockets, and communities now have it across the country, and that allows to integrate research in different ways. It's also very interesting, at least from my own experience, that there is no contradiction between cutting-edge research and working very closely with communities and trying to use our privilege, our resources, our ability to actually raise funding and be able to access things, like the fact that from the moment that you're a member of a UCL community, you have a huge library of electronic resources that community members don't have access to. Your logging allowing you to do that. And actually collaborating and co-creating knowledge a lot of time will mean taking some of this knowledge and giving the power away and working together with people in different ways. And you can think about the different skills also that what you can learn by working with communities. There are many, many ways in which you can develop it. Like, for example, you will be able to develop new communication skills and understand when to say and how to say things. I'm sometimes joking that one of the things that you learn about working with communities is even which biscuits you should bring to a community meeting in order not to cause offense or just to cause antagonism. And you can actually, even with a packet of biscuit. It's also about knowing where you are with the science. So one of the things that I usually say to communities when we're starting to work is that even if I'll move here and I'm going to spend the next 3 years of my life learning this place, I won't have your knowledge of what you know about your space, your place, and what's going on in it. And it's actually, that's one of the sources of the co-creation of knowledge, of saying, I have some of it which coming from my university education, but you have lived experiences, exactly what Caroline was mentioning a minute ago, and the integration of them is creating new opportunities. So there are new questions we can ask, there are opportunities for new collaboration, there are new insight, and this point about the importance and lack of importance of your work, where does it sit in the world, can lead to different experiences. And I have different learning experiences. For example, one of them that it was really valuable was working with mothers and toddlers in Seattle about their preparation for earthquakes and for other eventualities, and learning that there are different conditions that you can only understand by learning with families about what is important for them. So what kind of things you learned with citizen science or through community engagement, and you can look at that. You can get people that are more interested in scientific method, and that will be a two-direction understanding. You can work with community as both of you will learn new insight about scientific tools and practices. You will learn about also project-specific issues, which, as again, you just heard, you will learn what are the problems, what is the jargon of specific community organization or NGO that are doing. And you'll also develop different aspects of scientific reasoning and other things together with people. You actually become a better researcher by doing this type of thing. So that's kind of the motivation for doing that. And I've been now doing that, as you just heard, for a very long time. And it's extremely satisfying way of carrying out research. You're doing changes and you see them in the world in different ways. So that's about for me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Muki. Thank you. Thank you to Caroline and Muki together, who I hope, you know, and Muki for making that point about the kind of sharing our privilege and sharing power, and Caroline showing just what power and knowledge exists out there outside UCL, and actually bringing together will make you better researchers and knowledge be better. So thank you so much. Okay, we've finished with our keynotes, and we're going to move from arguably our most experienced to our students who are really at the very beginning of things and who tried out working with and for an external voluntary sector organisation during their dissertation. And the context of this is also the entire year was the kind of pandemic year of pretty much all was locked down, or certainly not on campus, etc. So we're going to hear from a great group of students who have just finished. Lucy and Roman, possibly Yanxun. Oh yes, I can see Yanxun's here. Lucy, Roman, Yanxun and Zoe. We're going to hear from these students, as well as from Clare Parry, who is one of our community collaborators. And just to get us started, and just to kind of show how on the agenda at UCL kind of this is, I'd just like to share a welcome message that our new Provost, Michael Spence, has kindly recorded for us to open this student showcase bit. So I am just going to share my screen.
Hi, I'm Michael Spence. I'm President and Provost of UCL. You know, the Community Research Initiative is one charged with the very founding ethos of UCL as an institution. We're an institution that has always been committed to the notion of useful knowledge and service finding a place together, of knowledge in collaboration with community, seeing an impact in the lives of individuals and of communities right across London, indeed across our nation and the world. What the Community Research Initiative does is to bring volunteer communities and groups of students together in collaboration to address real-world problems. And so it is my great privilege to be able to present to you some of the work of our master's students this year involved in the Community Research Initiative.
Great. So thank you so much to Michael Spence for recording that message for us. And that will lead us on to then our very first student, who Lucy Lawrenson is going to speak with us first, and has actually prepared something in collaboration with her collaborator, Clare Parry. So I think Lucy is going to speak first. Deep breaths. She's going to, if you just unmute yourself, and you should be able to share your screen. Thank you so much. And Lucy, unmute, and the floor is yours.
Hi everyone, and thank you so much, Anne, for organising this brilliant event. And thank you to everyone who's already spoken. I think we've had some really great insights already. Before I start, can I just check? Can you see my screen? Yeah, perfect. Okay, brilliant. So yeah, as I said, we've had some really great insights already, and I know Claire and I are both really excited to now share with you our experience of CRIS and collaboration. So the words that you can see on screen there, accommodating multiple publics in Tottenham's green spaces, that is in fact the title of my dissertation. And my research really looked at how park design and management in Tottenham serves different user groups. So looking, for example, at how the kind of infrastructure in parks can facilitate people with mobility issues, or whether people in the LGBTQI community feel sort of welcome and served by parks. And for this research, I was looking at and working with two key groups, so Haringey Local Authority and Friends groups. So Friends groups, for context, are voluntary community groups who help look after green spaces, and they tend to work quite closely with the council to make sure that our parks, our green spaces are well used and well loved and well maintained. So here we go. So this is a photo of the wildflower meadow in Downhills Park, which is one of my 3 research sites. And it's actually the park that Claire, my co-presenter, is involved with in her capacity as a friend of the space. So Downhills Park is, in a way, where this whole thing started for me. And I will go into more detail on that in a minute, but just to say that I approached Claire to ask if she'd like to collaborate. And we ended up working together, but Claire also brought in a third collaborator, his gentleman called Paul from Haringey Park's Services Department. So there were 3 of us collaborating on this project. Here we go. Okay, so a little bit of background about me. I was obviously doing my master's this year, and my degree title is Environment, Politics and Society. And I was writing my dissertation, or well, thinking about my dissertation and then writing it, obviously during the pandemic, and over a series of lockdowns that, you know, I'm sure we all experienced. So in that context, obviously, you know, you couldn't really go anywhere, but you could go for a walk. You could go to your local park to exercise or to just get some fresh air. So that's kind of where my interest in parks came from, because I was doing more of that. And I think for the first time in my life, I started to think about parks, not just as sort of destinations, but also as workspaces, as places where people, you know, make a living or volunteer. And that got me thinking about, you know, who's responsible for parks and who are the key stakeholders. So my sort of initial ideas about my dissertation coincided with me discovering CRIS. So I actually totally stumbled across CRIS. It wasn't something that I was told about as such. I actually found CRIS on the UCL Union website when I was looking for a job one evening. So yeah, it was very random. And from kind of reading about CRIS, I was really interested in what it was, but I had this perception that it probably wasn't for me. You know, I'm a social scientist, and I wondered if it was more for sort of natural sciences. I wondered if you had to be a more experienced researcher, or you know, if there was a certain criteria that you had to meet to be part of CRIS. So I was interested, but I wasn't sure, you know, whether it was something that I was ultimately going to be able to do. So I emailed Anne, and she immediately got back to me and said, you know, shall we have a one-to-one meeting? I can fill you in a bit more. And we did that, and she explained to me the sort of guiding principles behind CRIS, and I was so excited speaking to her, and I think it felt right immediately. And I think the reason for that, for why it felt right, is that in universities, in our institutions, I think we're very good at talking about research relationships, and how, as wonderful as they are, they can be quite problematic in the sense they can be quite one-sided. And I'd kind of come across those arguments and those issues over the course of my studies, you know, in stuff that I'd read, but I hadn't seen any evidence for how we could kind of engage with those issues, or how we could start to move past them. And I think CRIS really seemed like a way to start doing that, and to start thinking about how to build research that was useful to participants and more sort of participatory. So from that first meeting with Anne, I, you know, told her about my interest in parks, and she said, well, you know, if Downhills Park is what you're interested in, and you're interested in friends groups, why don't I set up a meeting between you and the Friends of Downhills Park? So I had a meeting. Or we had a meeting, and we invited Clare along as a representative from Downhills Park. But Clare at that point said, oh, well, I'd love to come to this meeting, but have you considered the council? Have you thought about the council in your research? So she actually had the idea of inviting Paul along, and that's how that sort of collaboration between the three of us started. So in terms of that first meeting, there's two things that I want to highlight. I think the first is that having Anne there was brilliant. It was so helpful to me. And I think, you know, there's a bit of an elephant in the room when it comes to master's research, where on one hand, we know that masters are sort of intended to give students research tools and skills, but at the same time, we tend to be quite sort of inexperienced researchers. We probably haven't done it that much before. And I think having an experienced researcher in the room who knows about relationship management and knows how to kind of build those connections, it took the pressure off me, and it was just a really helpful experience to have. The second thing, as I've already said, is that it was Clare who suggested that Paul come along. And I think had Clare not made that suggestion, my research agenda could have ended up being quite different. I might have not even kind of considered the council at all. So I think collaboration, I think what I want to say about collaboration is that it's not just a buzzword. It is a real sort of process in which participants can really help build a research agenda. What's this? Okay, brilliant. So now I want to speak about what I see the benefits of collaboration being. So I think that there are lots of benefits to collaborating, some more practical and some more sort of ideological. But I'll start with the practical ones. So I think if you work with a collaborator, obviously collaborators are well situated within their own networks to help you sort of build further connections. And that's exactly what happened for me. So there's a research method called snowballing, which is where participants essentially recruit other participants. And I think, you know, having Clare and Paul sort of vouch for my research allowed me to, allowed us to kind of use snowballing really well. And they, you know, created those connections for me. So I had several participants. I ended up interviewing 14 people for my research. So that's a sort of practical reason to consider CRIS. I think secondly, you get a much more profound understanding of your topic area by working with collaborators or a collaborator, because the research relationship isn't restricted to one interview or one meeting. You know, it's much longer. It can last weeks or months. And I think even if you can't directly sort of reference those conversations that you have over that period, you get to know your topic better, and I think your research will always be better for that. I think moving past the sort of practical reasons to think about CRIS, it makes writing a dissertation a better experience. I think, you know, dissertations can be really lonely, and whether you're writing a dissertation in your room or in the library, you know, with the current sort of COVID context in mind, I think it's always quite a sort of solitary experience, or it can be. So having Anne and Claire and Paul to kind of touch base with and talk about my ideas with, but also just feel excited about my project with, it just made it a more pleasant experience. And for that reason, I would really recommend CRIS. And I think, you know, in terms of what collaboration means for research, I think the way a collaboration actually sort of impacts a specific project can vary greatly, and it's up to you what your collaboration looks like. But I think what it always does is break down some of the walls that exist between institutions like UCL on one hand, and local communities who we are researching and writing about. Because I think however well-intentioned research is, and it is always, you know, fairly well-intentioned, at the end of the day, it can be quite extractive, and it can feel like you're saying, you know, give me an hour of your time so that I can get this degree, so that I can get this piece of coursework done or this publication. And I think, you know, we can try and address that imbalance by producing research and writing research that is actually useful to participants. And ultimately, you can only find out what's going to be useful by speaking to people and having those conversations. So the final thing that I'll say before handing over to Claire is that, you know, I want to be honest, and I want to highlight some of the potential drawbacks or obstacles that you might face with CRIS. So in my case, well, I'll actually start by saying that CRIS is still very young. You know, it's only been running for, I think, a couple of years or 3 years. Maybe Anne can tell us. But I think while the program is brilliant, UCL staff are not necessarily aware of it at this point, and maybe don't know how they feel about it yet. And in my case, my supervisor was initially quite excited by CRIS, but then had some quite sort of serious reservations about it, and whether it would sort of stop me from writing an academically robust piece of work. And I think that's fair enough, because, you know, supervisors and academic staff, they have their own criteria that they have to meet. And actually research papers have a certain criteria that they have to meet. And it can be difficult to balance that with the desire to sort of write something that's going to be useful for a community. But I think what I learned from that experience was that it's important to be flexible and adaptable. So while I actually ended up de-emphasizing the collaboration aspect in my paper, and didn't end up writing a list of recommendations, I am still able to kind of give those recommendations to Paul and Claire, because we still have that connection. And that's the beautiful thing about collaborating, is, again, it's a longer relationship. So there's still space for me to do what I set out to do with CRIS, even if that hasn't made it into the final sort of 12,000 words. And another thing that we're kind of talking about is me supporting Paul in some focus groups that he's going to be running for the council on diversity and inclusion in parks. So using my insight from my project to help him with his work. So I think, you know, there's lots of different ways that a collaboration can pan out. But what I would say before handing over is that Anne is brilliant, and working with her is brilliant. And while you may encounter issues or, you know, potential roadblocks doing CRIS, you'll never be facing them alone, because she'll always be there to support you. So with that, I will hand over to Claire, and thank you very much for listening. Oh, how do I?
Thanks so much, Lucy. I think I can stop your screen being shared. Yeah, stop participant screen sharing. Great. And I'd just like to welcome Clare, who is going to speak. I just wanted to pop in now just to say this is now when we'd like to ask you to use Mentimeter, which I'm delighted to say some people already have started and got in there. So Joanna's going to reshare the little code that you'll need, and I'm going to hand the floor over to Clare, and I will share my screen, Clare, when I hear my cue from you. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Anne. And firstly, thank you to Lucy and Anne and CRIS for inviting me to join you today. And it's been really brilliant to hear Lucy's reflections on the whole process just now. There's a little bit of overlap perhaps between what I'm going to say and what Lucy's going to say, so forgive me any repetition. And I'm going to talk briefly about the expectations I had for this collaboration, a little bit about the collaboration itself, and a certain amount about the potential outcomes and impact that it's going to have for Downhills Park. And you know, it's brilliant. Lucy's just talked about how exciting the collaboration was for her and kind of where it's taken her. And a little bit about me. As you know, I'm involved with the Friends of Downhills Park. And Downhills Park is a brilliant, brilliant park. It's right across the road from my house. I've lived there for about 11 years. And for a lot of that time, I've been involved with the Friends of Downhills Park. And I got involved with them because I wanted to have a stake really in my local community. And it was a way to get to know people and to feel a part of the place that I had moved into and that I live in. And I get a huge amount of satisfaction from being involved with the park. I get a lot of enjoyment from it. And, you know, it's not without its frustrations, but Lucy, Anne and CRIS are definitely in the enjoyment and satisfaction camp. It's been brilliant to work with them. And kind of Lucy's talked about her, you know, how this came about. And, you know, back in March 2020, you know, I was quite intrigued to get an unexpected email from Anne asking if the Friends of Downhills Park would like to influence or collaborate in some research to benefit Downhills Park. And she loosely outlined Lucy's areas of interest around the role of green space in organising local communities and particularly in low-income areas, which, you know, Tottenham really is. And we've heard Lucy talk a little bit about that. And my gut instinct was just to say yes. You know, I wanted us to be involved, but I was quite concerned that the Friends of Downhills Park on their own wouldn't really make very much use of Lucy's, as we've heard, 12,000 words and all of her, you know, insights that she's gained. And what was really good was, as you've heard, Lucy's mentioned that I asked if we could work with the council. And I think that was one of the brilliant things about this research approach, that it encourages that. It encouraged involving other people. And for me, that was really exciting, actually. You know, I wanted to be involved, but I wanted other people to be involved as well. And that open approach is it's really encouraging. And I hope it also means that the research findings are going to have a broader reach and impact over time, because they won't just be relevant to Downhills Park, they'll be relevant to other parks in the local area. And so I think, given that sort of situation I've tried to briefly describe, it's really fair to say that my expectations for the research process were exceeded. The level of enthusiasm and openness that Anne and that Lucy have brought to the process, and that Lucy's brought to her interest, have been really positive. And personally, it's been really motivating. You know, it's been exciting to have the opportunity to learn more about Downhills Park and about how the park is and how the park isn't used and what it does and doesn't offer the local community. So when I was thinking about this, it led me to think about kind of what I've learned from this collaboration. And I didn't say this at the beginning, but the title that it brought to mind was Rethinking Downhills Park, because the whole process has made me rethink Downhills Park. But at this point, I'm going to ask, before we move to that, I'm going to ask Anne if she can do her screen share for Mentimeter, because this is the bit where I want to ask all of you to just think about parks for a moment. And what are the words that come to mind? You know, whether it's your local park, whether it's a big city centre park, it's a small bit of green space near where you live, or it's your favourite piece of green space that you go to. You know, like we've all used parks a lot more during the pandemic, I think. So hopefully that is continuing to generate words. Certainly when I think about Downhills Park, quite often I think about it from a very personal point of view. I think about trees, and I think about nature, and I like the squirrels. I can see we've got ducks in the word cloud. That makes me quite happy to see. You know, I think often a lot about the people that I've met there and friends that I've made through being involved in Downhills Park. You know, and on the downside, I often think about the litter. It's best not to get me started on that, you know, but there's good and bad in all of our parks. But it's quite interesting to see this word, Clare, because it's I think what comes out of these for me is just how much parks provide to us as individuals and to communities. So yeah, thanks for all your words. I think we should keep hold of that. And finally, kind of coming back to rethinking Downhills Park, that's what the collaboration with Lucy has made me do. And I haven't read, you know, the final report yet, but I'm sure it's going to be fascinating. And it's great to hear that there's already a continuation of the collaboration through opportunities with the council. I think that's just brilliant. And it isn't as though the Friends of Downhills Park didn't think about some of these challenges before. But I think what the research provides, or what I hope it will provide, is kind of evidence and a framework to support our discussions and help move them to the next stage. And that's fundamentally, you know, having the council involved. They're already on the same page with us, hopefully. They want to go on this journey with us. And there's going to be a greater degree of alignment in terms of the broader direction of travel. And so I really do believe that, you know, this research has the potential to improve Downhills Park. And that's going to make a difference for the community. And it's going to make a difference for all those communities that live and work around the park and enjoy the park. And so I think in closing, I've just got to say that, you know, I feel quite lucky that Anne and Lucy approached the Friends of Downhills Park. I think the park will be a better place for their involvement. You know, it's been a great model of research. And I'm kind of, like as Lucy said, I'm looking forward to continuing the connection. I'm looking forward to reading the end report and seeing how we can use those findings to bring about positive change. And then if Lucy doesn't get snapped up by the council, I kind of wanted to come and run the Friends of Downhills Park. That'd be a great outcome.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Claire, for that, and Lucy before you. And I just wanted to say happy birthday to Lucy, who not only did she hand her dissertation in yesterday, she then wrote this presentation and came to present to you all on her birthday. So happy birthday and thank you. And I'd now love to move to Zoe Schott. Hi, Zoe. Zoe is our next student to speak to us, and when you're ready, you've unmuted, wonderful, and share your screen when you're ready. Thank you so much.
Got it. Hold on while I do some Zoom acrobatics. Can you see just my slide screen, or do you need to see?
I can, but I feel like I can only see half the slides.
Got it. Okay, hold on one second. How about now?
Perfect. Beautiful. There we go.
All right, cool. Okay, well, hi everybody. I've really been great. The past presentations that I've seen have really been great. I've totally agree with Lucy on so much of what she said about what's great about CRIS and everything. So to introduce myself, my name is Zoe Schott, and I have just completed a collaborative research project through CRIS. I worked with the UK-based sexual health service provider Brooke to study the impacts of origin country sodomy laws on UK migrant sexual health. So today I will discuss the 3 major benefits of participation in the CRIS program for me, which were guidance, learning, and discovery. So I initially approached Anne because I wanted to put the new research skills that I was learning on my course to good use in the service of an important cause. I wanted to set myself a challenge and at once try and give back to my new London community. However, I thought that my degree in foreign policy would be pretty incompatible with any of CRIS's local nonprofits' needs. And so I thought that any research that I undertook through CRIS would have to be sort of unrelated to my dissertation. And I also had a passion for learning about human sexuality and advocating for sexual freedoms and reproductive rights. And so I wanted to volunteer for an organization that shared these passions, as I viewed this interest of mine as more of a passion than a career path to be pursued sort of separately to other possibly drier but more employable lines of policy making. So in my searches for an organization that shared my values, I came across my eventual collaborating organization, Brook. Brook is a voluntary sector sexual health service provider and has clinics throughout the country, and it focuses on improving sexual health inequalities among Britain's young people. But as Brook's mission was centered on sexual health inequalities in the UK, I still found it quite hard to imagine how a piece of foreign policy research that I needed to complete for my degree would be useful for this organization. So through CRIS and the collaborative research process, my collaborators and I were not only able to find a research topic that served both of our interests, but I also discovered a whole new intriguing realm of study and advocacy within my discipline that has informed my career trajectory. So here's the story. Before we even reached out to Brook, I voiced my reservations to Anne, who encouraged us all to meet to see if we could find common ground. At our first meeting, we discussed Brook's objectives for research and discovered that it was amid a multi-phased, multi-year research project on sexual health inequalities and the social determinants of sexual health. And so this was common ground. It was a sort of unanticipated major ideological overlap, given that I was interested in the ways that policy can create inequalities and also be used to ameliorate them. So it made the possibilities for doing my dissertation in partnership with Brook greater by demonstrating that there was enough common ground. And then Dimitrios, who is head of Brook's research team, and I met over several months for some brainstorming sessions, and we talked over ideas, hoping to design a project that would result in a bit of new knowledge useful to both Brook and me. And Dimitrios was so generous with his time and so willing to discuss all the possibilities. I also held meetings with another Brook officer who focuses on policy advocacy and discovered that the organization had an interest in learning about macro level socio-political determinants of sexual health and sexual health inequalities like colonization and sexually restrictive policies. And so during this phase of ambiguity with my dissertation topic, while Dimitrios and I were brainstorming together, I started assisting on another phase of Brook's larger inequalities research project, both to sort of return the favor and learn about the organization and the issues that it works on. The other project was a rapid literature review with researchers at Open University on how vulnerable young people use sexual health services. And in doing so, I learned quite quickly about the current thought on young people's sexual health inequalities, what practitioners and advocates are curious about and why. But I also started noticing what they don't know yet. It seemed that each piece of literature that I was reading for this rapid review mentioned that stigma was a barrier to young vulnerable people's sexual health service seeking. But little seemed to be known about who the stigma is impacted, why they were so pertinent to some groups and not others, and how the stigma has actually changed individuals' behavior. And so now, finally, after months of ambiguity and brainstorming, we had a research question. And it arose from genuine curiosity of people at Brook to study the socio-political determinants of health, and also my newfound awareness of the field of study, thanks to my involvement in that additional project. And then over the next 6 months, which much help from Dimitrios and Brook, I used Brook's client data and interviews from several Brook employees and related professionals to study the impact of origin country sodomy laws on young UK migrants' experiences of sexual stigmas that then hinder their sexual health service seeking. And so from my story, I hope you take away 3 areas in which CRIS transformed my dissertation process and truthfully my entire master's experience for the better. So first, with guidance, with much needed and additional guidance. Second, with uniquely relevant and practical learning. And then third, with discovery of diverse paths and leading to a newfound clarity in my career goals. So first, guidance. So this time last year, as I imagine many students watching now feel, the prospect of choosing a dissertation topic was absolutely overwhelming. I had only wispy ideas and interests, and I hoped to study something I found important and create a relevant product, but I had very little idea of how to actually go about this. So fortunately, in the CRIS program, it's expected that students develop research questions and designs in partnership with the organization. And so this is actually exactly what we did. We brainstormed and we negotiated, and we eventually settled on a plan that both parties were happy with. And not only did I have help from just any research partner, but Dimitrios, who is a professional researcher in the field, who was able to help me ask the right questions and pressure test ideas, and served as a guide and a source of invaluable information throughout as I approached this research topic that was quite new to me. And so through CRIS, students like me, whose ideas have little shape, have quite a lot of help from knowledgeable professionals when designing their topic. And then additionally, having never done something similar, I came to the research project with so many questions about developing a research question, managing stakeholder interests, recovering from setbacks, just to name a few. And I was receiving great and thorough training in research methodologies through my course. But by the time I was catalyzing my research partnership, I hadn't yet received much guidance on how to actually go about the independent research process. And so from Anne's direct mentorship, which was fabulous, and Chris's skills workshops, CRIS students received much guidance on the actual nuts and bolts of research. So for instance, through the ambiguity of settling on a research question, and kept my faith by assuring me it was the normal part of the research process. And then later, when aspects of the project didn't go as planned, she preached research resilience and helped me find avenues forward. And so now, I mean, I hope this isn't the case for students that are attending this year, but we were completely remote last year. And so we weren't around other students much to discuss ideas and bounce thoughts off them. And so Anne and Dimitrios's additional and early involvement in my dissertation process guided me through the process and made it all very manageable. And so second, through the CRIS experience, I acquired new knowledge and experiences that I wouldn't have otherwise had if I hadn't chosen to do a collaborative dissertation. The substantive knowledge I learned on the socio-political determinants of sexual health inequalities is more relevant and practical than I might have been able to learn in a classroom or a Zoom room. As someone who sought higher education for a practical career, not an academic one, I wanted to avoid sort of common pitfalls of higher education, like academic isolation, and ensure that my learnings and expertise were relevant. So through my conversations with Brooke collaborators and assisting with Brooke and the Open University's Lit Review, I was working with information that was actively being sought and used by a live, dynamic organization. It was knowledge that was proven useful. This meant that for my dissertation, I was able to work towards answering questions relevant to how Brooke provides its services and achieves its mission right now. Which I thought was really cool. And additionally, I learned soft and hard skills through participating in CRIS that I otherwise wouldn't have. So for instance, I learned how to do a formal rapid literature review, which helped massively when doing a less formal lit review for my dissertation. I also learned how to do interviews. Without a partner organization, I likely wouldn't have attempted them, but my project forced me to step outside my comfort zone and grow by putting me in a completely new situation. The size and the scope of the project were also challenging. I had to develop new time and project management skills in order to work efficiently enough, helped along, of course, by Anne and her skills seminars. Then finally, discovery. The single greatest benefit of the CRIS program for me was ultimately how, through it, I gained clarity on what I want to do. I had started my master's program knowing that I had an interest in policy and inequality, but hoping that through experiences during the year, I would discover what kind of expertise I would like to develop and make a career in. And through working with Brooke, I was exposed to people who make a career out of researching and advocating for sexual freedoms and more progressive realm of policies on sex and sexuality. And this has showed me the possibilities for professional engagement with a very progressive field of advocacy and research. And it ultimately melded my previously unreconciled interests in policy and inequality and sexuality. So not only did I come to witness these careers, but I also made connections with passionate people working in this field whom I otherwise wouldn't have been exposed to or inspired by. And so that's it for me. I hope that I've convinced you what a great opportunity this is, and I really encourage you to all look into it.
Thank you so much, Zoe, for your insights there and sharing your experience. I wasn't quite anticipating how emotional I might feel during this showcase, so thank you so much. I'd love to pass on now to Roman, who's up and ready. Thanks, unmuting, and I invite you to share your screen for your slides if you'd like, and you have the floor, Roman.
Hey everybody, firstly, can you hear me?
We can hear you. Your slides aren't in presentation mode just yet.
Yeah.
If that's cool for you.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Okay, hey everybody, thank you Anne for hosting us, and thank you Zoe for that talk. I feel slightly like I'm not sure how this is going to go now because that was a brilliant presentation. But yeah, thank you to all the other speakers as well, and to everyone for lending us your time today. My name is Malin-Hiscock. I am now a former master's student at the Institute for Global Prosperity. I studied prosperity, innovation, and entrepreneurship during the inaugural year of the course, which kind of suits my position as sort of one of the first students to complete a dissertation project in partnership with CRIS. My project, as you can see there, is called, or was called, Community Wealth Building at the Felix Project, Innovating Practices of Food Rescue and Redistribution. So thankfully for you, we won't go into too much detail on the project today, although it was pretty interesting for me. The important part of that title is where it says the Felix Project, as this is the organization I partnered with. So who are they? Well, they are London's largest food rescue and redistribution charity, meaning that they collect surplus food, or that's food that would have otherwise been wasted. They take that and they put it through, process it through their warehouses, and they redistribute it to those in need, sort of namely members of the population who are experiencing food insecurity, poverty, and hunger. So a pretty big organization, which was particularly cool and interesting for me. So what's the structure? I'm going to keep it quite simple. I'm going to talk about first how I discovered CRIS, and then how the partnership with the Felix Project was built, a few key learnings from the management of the project, and then I'll finish off with an overview of the research deliverables. So, like a few of the other presentations today, I kind of came across CRIS rather by accident. It was the second semester of the year, so that's after Christmas, and the dissertation module for my course has been introduced for a reason that sort of evades me now, and I really can't remember. I seem to miss that introductory lecture, but one of my course mates, one of my friends, kindly sort of pointed me in the right direction and mentioned CRIS. So all of that is to say that if you're already considering CRIS now and thinking about it now, then you're in a very good position. So I wanted to do something practical with my dissertation. So if I was going to spend 4 to 5 months writing something, I would hope that more than 1 or 2 people had read it, and hopefully it could get acted upon as well. So I was already planning to reach out to an organization to collaborate sort of independently on my own. But CRIS, upon discovering CRIS, I found out that they had sort of the framework and the access to do so. So I set up a call with Anne, in mid-January time to discuss options, decided that the program was right for me, but I really needed some clarity on sort of my direction in terms of where I was going with the project. So I went away to compile sort of a short list of 5 prospective partner organizations. That process took a couple of months, but I eventually settled on an organization. That was the Felix Project. So CRIS facilitated the introductory lecture with the Felix Project in late March. And this is where we established our mutual points of interest. The Felix Project sort of hinted towards several research projects or prospective research projects, and all of them had this sort of the aim to improve the charity strategic thinking, planning, or approaches in the future, and to hope and to ensure that it continuously improves, innovates, and discovers new ways to achieve all of its various goals. It's a pretty ambitious organization. Outside of that, I have my own interests outside of food rescue and redistribution. And so the challenge for me was to go away and to see whether there were any sort of tenable project titles that would be of interest to both parties. I came back for a follow-up meeting in late April, which we then processed through a research agreement, which was signed off in late May. A large part of my project was conducted sort of in-house, so within the organization, because I needed to get to know what they were doing for the sake of the project objectives. So I needed to collect data from the staff members through interviews and various sort of volunteering activities. Fortunately, I had a high degree of access to senior members of staff and Felix's wider network. So this really helped me to kick off the project. And as was mentioned earlier, it helped me to carry out sort of an effective snowball methodology in parts. So managing the projects, I thought it would be better to give you an insight into a few of the challenges and some of their sort of potential solutions. So one of the first ones for me was reaching out to new contacts for interviews. And this is clearly the case for a lot of the dissertation students. This is, as I said, a difficult thing for any student to do, especially during COVID, when everyone is completely burnt out with screen time and online work. And sort of the last thing they want to do is look at my face for an hour, sort of barking questions at them. But people were pretty receptive generally, but those that weren't, what I suggest is to really leverage the status of the community organization as a reason for people giving you their time. My project had real sort of actionable research outputs, and that was extremely important for guaranteeing their commitment, especially their time commitment. It's also good to be patient as well and keep chasing. You know, it's not rude. The worst thing that they can do is say no and then you stop, but just be persistent with that. It's really not a bad thing. Second challenge is establishing regular contact with the community partners. So the Felix Project and the people that I was in contact with there. My organization actually expressed a lot of interest in maintaining regular contact. They sort of suggested once to every 1 to 2 weeks. But like every charity, they were overworked and overstretched. So inevitably they ended up missing a few meetings, which is fine. A way to get around that is to be very organized, such as by writing sort of agendas for your meetings as early as possible, and then to send them over to ensure that there's limited sort of wasted time, and then also to send email reminders even on the day itself, even if you think it's unnecessary. So the third and final challenge for me was to determine when I needed to actually stop collecting data and to start writing. As you can see, my project kind of lasted throughout the year, or the second half of the year rather, and it was probably done quite late. So I only really left myself about a month to write the whole thing. And the classic temptation is to bulk out your disk with as much sort of data as possible to substantiate your arguments. But I think it's really important to stick to time schedules and to make a schedule in the first place and then stick to it to sort of maximize the effectiveness of your writing. So the last bit, delivering the research outcomes. So as mentioned, and as mentioned by a lot of the presentations today, we drew up a formal research agreement in May time that had both an academic and a sort of practical outcomes. On the academic side, for me, it was a 15,000 word dissertation project, which was specific to my course. And then on the practical side, it was perhaps more important, and which I held and I focused on a bit more, was a condensed version of the dissertation to make up a 7,000 word report, although it was actually slightly over that. And then that was accompanied by a 45-minute presentation to the acting CEO and then other senior members of staff. It wasn't meant to be 45 minutes, but normally my presentation style is quite casual when I like to talk. So sort of it was interlaced with questions. It was meant to be 20 minutes originally, but hey ho, 45 minutes, we really got into some detail there. That was great. So clearly, as you can see, one thing to note was that I ended up doing a lot more work for my dissertation than most students with the additional research outputs on the practical side. That was pre-agreed. I didn't have to do that. I put that upon myself, you know, but yeah, so they weren't mandatory, but it was definitely beneficial for both parties and for sort of CRIS to work really in the end. So yeah, as you see, everything pretty much was supported by a literature review. That was a third of my actual 15,000 word dissertation, so that was in depth. I did a big analysis on the innovative practice in food rescue and redistribution, and then all of that sort of filtered into a set of recommendations, which they've actually paid a lot of attention to, and they've asked me to present to more members of the charity and the board as well. So they're really valuing the research that I did. And so that's been great for me, really. It's been a fantastic experience. That is my presentation. Thank you very much for listening to me, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the session.
Thank you so much, Roman. Oh, brilliant. Thank you. I'm glad. I'd love to listen to you for 45 minutes, but we've got a bit more to get through. So thank you so much. And that's wonderful. Thank you for talking us through the kind of practical component that you did that was beneficial to the community. So the community product, which we support students and their organizations to do. So that's real impact there that you've just mentioned about the research that you're doing, that the organization is sitting up and listening to, and it's helpful and beneficial for what they're trying to do. So thanks for that. We've got a final, thank you so much, Roman. We've got a final student who has directly related to her degree and her experiences, has got a new job, and so is juggling moving house and a new job. But Yanxun has wonderfully found some time to come and speak with us. And I think for a couple of minutes is just going to explain your kind of experience with CRIS to finish up this bit of the student showcase before we move on. So Yanxun, if you'd like to unmute, we'd love to hear some of your reflections. Thank you.
Hello, hi everyone. Can you hear me clearly? Yeah, great. I feel so guilty that I don't have much time to prepare some wonderful slides, so I think I just talk through my stories. I remember last year this time I just joined UCL. It's pandemic, everything's online, and I was like, let's get as involved as much into the uni as a student experience. Like, you pay for your tuition fees and everything's online, and why not just join CRIS? And I mean, I have no idea what CRIS is when I joined CRIS, but there are so many introduction events, seminars and tutorials, a lot of trainings going on. It just, even though you are not planning to collaborate with a community, I think it's still great just to get involved with these events. And I think those really helps not only for your dissertation, but also for your general course essays or courseworks. And oh, I forgot to introduce myself. Yeah, I studied MSc International Real Estate and Planning at Parry School of Planning, and I did my dissertation in examining the pattern of housing-induced poverty in the UK. And for this research project, I collaborated with Shelter. It's a charity that aims to help homeless people in the UK. And At first, my journey to find a collaborator is actually not like I know Shelter and I want to collaborate with Shelter. It's actually like I have met several people from different organizations. I have talked to Pamela from the Notting Hill Genius and Robert from Camden Foundation for private tenants. And after that, I found Alex from Shelter. But I still find it useful to talk to people from different organizations, especially everything's online. And I'm so glad that CRIS actually provides me this opportunity, because as a student ourselves, it's quite hard for us to reach out to the wider community. Like, Kate, do you have time to talk about this? And CRIS acts like a bridge, links us as students in the university and the wider communities. And during my collaboration with Shelter, because my research is not very qualitative based, I didn't have interviews how I collaborate with Shelter is more like Alex works more at helping people in my research. And I think one of the most difficult parts in the dissertation is finding the research question that you want to look into. And oh, I think my quiet room is the end. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I might have to finish in a few seconds, but please join CRIS, it's very useful. Yeah, I think I have to go now.
Thank you so much, Yanxun. Thank you. Bye. There's research and presentations in action. That concludes our section on the student presentations. And I just want to, we've got a couple more speakers to finish up with. I'd like to invite David Gough. We are part of, CRIS is part of a wider project and agenda at UCL. And our project is called Icicle, which I have to read this off the screen because yet again, another acronym. We are increasing and evaluating student impact in knowledge and learning exchange. So Icicle. So CRIS, as I hope you've seen, we're trying to, it's this two-way learning and two-way exchange of power, knowledge, resources, etc. And so we're part of a wider project funded by Research England and Office for Students, as well as in kind, the UCL itself contributes me, for example, or part of me. So David has kindly agreed to speak with us for 5-10 minutes or so today about a really huge piece of work, an important piece of work that was a review of kind of this way of working for students and what we already know about it in order to then take it forward, share good practice and increase it as an activity at a university like UCL. So David, I'd love to, you have unmuted, I'd love you to share your screen and the floor is yours.
Hi everybody, I'll just try and find my screen. Here we are. Great. Hi, so I'm an academic at UCL and I'm involved with Anne and others in a study of student knowledge exchange, of which CRIS is a really interesting example. And so I'm just going to tell you very quickly about the project. And the project is studying CRIS and other student knowledge exchange initiatives, both in UCL and in the University of Manchester. But my particular role is to look at the research evidence that there is on these type of projects. And to do that, we're doing a systematic review, which is a formal process for examining the literature. So first of all, as we just heard, to do a research project, you need a research question, review question. then you need to define what studies you're going to look at, search for them, check the studies you find meet the criteria, collect data from the studies, map out the studies, check the quality of the studies, and then synthesize to answer the questions. So that sounds relatively simple, but actually it's quite a lot of work. But to do this and to define what studies, we have to think about what is knowledge exchange. So key words, knowledge and exchange. So there's knowledge in the university and there's knowledge out in society, and there is some link, some engagement between the two. And that there is a word called knowledge transfer, but that sounds to be rather one way. So we use exchange because both people in university and the external partner benefits from this process. So we've come up with this working definition. We may change it a bit. Action to embed, support, to develop HEI, that's university, higher education institution. Action to embed, support, to develop HEI engagement with non-academic partners. Purpose of creation, use and exchange of knowledge with the expectation of benefits to people. And student knowledge exchange is when that involves students in the HEI, which is what CRIS is all about. And this definition drew on a lot of other ones. I'm sure you can have access to these slides if you want to read these later. So we then have to search for these studies and systematic review. You look at the overlap between the different concepts and then you create a search strategy. And we found a horrendous number, 26,000 studies, and we had to go through these one by one to check which of those really were on student knowledge exchange. And we've come out with about 300 studies, but that took us a few months. And when we look at these studies, they're covering a whole lot of different projects, which I won't read them out, but here there's kind of 9 different approaches in these projects. And in this same slide, you can see I've put little dotted lines in green to think, well, maybe CRIS has some of these characteristics. You know, it's about social enterprise, being not-for-profit, about research collaboration, community service, things like that. But it's quite interesting to think, to unpack, what do we mean by knowledge exchange? So here we try to do that. So if you're examining, if you're studying, like we're trying to do, knowledge exchange projects, you need to think, well, what is the knowledge being exchanged? Is it tacit knowledge? Is it explicit knowledge? And is it driven by particular perspectives? And I was fascinated to hear about the CRIS projects that we heard about this afternoon, because I think, you know, the presenters talked about all of that. They talked about tacit information they got, explicit information, and how it was driven by particular views, whether it's about sexual health, whether it's about parks and their role in the community. And that's about knowledge both ways, is what the student was learning and what the student was bringing to the project. And then how is that knowledge being exchanged? Again, through these examples, we heard a lot about how the CRIS worked in practice, how the not-for-profit organizations worked with the master's students. And also we learned about the different types of benefits and outcomes of these wonderful initiatives. So the master students seem to benefit a lot from it, but also the external partners benefited, the universities benefited, and also wider society benefits from these initiatives. So it's really important for us to study CRIS and other student exchange initiatives to understand all of these things, the type of knowledge, the type of benefits. And this is my final slide, which is, unfortunately, the research we looked at hasn't been terribly strong because the studies haven't been controlled studies. They, although we've tried to be clear, they haven't always been clear about what they mean by knowledge exchange. They haven't always been clear about how their initiatives are achieving that. And they predominantly focus on the benefit for students. But I think we really heard this afternoon that these projects are wonderful, that they benefit students, but they're even more wonderful because they benefit the partner, the university, and wider society too. So sorry that was a bit of an academic presentation, but lovely to be part of this initiative and to hear about your experiences today.
Thank you so much, David. And don't apologise for bringing the academic to it. That is, in fact, one side of knowledge exchange that we're talking about here. And I deliberately wanted David to speak after the students because I knew that the students were going to demonstrate what we're finding in our systematic review. So that was wonderful. Thank you. We've reached the end of our formal presentations, and I would just like to turn now. We're really fortunate to, I think, I can certainly see his name here, and we're really fortunate to have Alan Thompson in the Zoom room. There you are. Hello. I will leave Alan to introduce himself. Suffice to say that, as I mentioned, he has the unenviable title of Vice Provost, London Engagement. And I'd love Alan to conclude what has been actually quite an emotional and really inspiring event. I hope you agree. I'd love Alan to make some concluding remarks before I have my final slide and I dismiss you all. So Alan, welcome, thank you, and you have the floor.
Thanks, Anne. I'm very pleased to make some closing remarks for this first Community Research Initiative Showcase event today, and thank you for inviting me. It's been a wonderful afternoon, and I've thoroughly enjoyed listening and learning from the speakers today. As David mentioned a few minutes ago, I particularly enjoyed Roman's relaxed style, though was pleased that you kept him to time. And I'd just like to thank the students, their voluntary organization colleagues, and keynote speakers for sharing their experiences and insights today. And for those of you that don't know me, my name is Alan Thompson. I'm actually Dean of the Faculty of Brain Sciences, but it's in my role as Provost. I've lost the vice bit and at UCL that I'm going to make my remarks this afternoon. My remit is to oversee, guide and connect our London-focused engagement, and I lead a dedicated London office whose goal is to enhance engagement, coordinate relationships and enrich society whilst amplifying UCL's impact in London. I am therefore absolutely delighted to see the engaged research on display here today between our master's students and London's voluntary and community sector. We value the incredible work that our local community organisations and citizen groups do every day with London citizens to improve lives and effect change. Indeed, I think this sector often fills the gaps where formal services cannot, and never more so during the pandemic. We certainly recognise and appreciate all of the tremendous work carried out by our partners in London over the past 18 months. As you all know, at UCL, we want to make our work matter, to make a difference to lives. And our focus is to work with London, for London. And there are several ways we try and do this with the voluntary sector in particular. Our long-established student volunteering service, the evaluation exchange in Camden and Newham, our cutting-edge new masters in art and science in creative health, and our new masters in citizen science. We heard from Muki earlier today about this exciting development, and of course, the Community Research Initiative. What all of these things have in common is a mission to enable cross-sector working with collaborative and transparent methods, listening to each other and sharing our assets, be they knowledge and skills, our spaces and technology. In the London office, we have developed a London framework which outlines the value of local and regional partnerships to UCL. And although this is not a strategy per se, it's a fantastic way of working which connects our partners, people and place here in London. Never before has collaboration, partnership working and commitment to engagement been so important. And I personally look forward to hearing how everything shared today develops in the future. I'll end by complimenting the students today, and indeed all those who took part in CRIS during this last year, thanking and recognizing you all for doing something different with your dissertations in this year of all years. Today has shown us how you have benefited, and also how our local communities and partners have benefited. You chose a new way of working, and one which fits exactly with UCL's partnership, people and place agenda. So many, many congratulations. Thank you, Anne.
Thank you so much, Alan, for those words. Thank you, and for concluding our event. I'd like to also extend huge congratulations and again birthday wishes for Lucy of our student speakers, and thank our keynote speakers for their time. Thank you, Joanna, for supporting today. And I'm just going to, I think if I can remember in all the excitement, I'm just going to share my screen just to show you that it's really easy to get involved. Your actions for today, everybody loves an action at the end of a meeting. Students are new and brave students who have joined this week. You know, here's some actions. Sign up. You're not committing to anything, but you will be part of this movement, and you will receive the newsletters and the info and the dates, etc. So sign up now. Joanna will share links, and it will also be in our follow-up email. We've got really focused information sessions running next week. We've got 3 of them at different times to try and fit in with everyone's timetables. So please do look at them. You can sign up for them, and we'll take the questions that we've received today and other questions, and we'll make sure that those are specifically answered next week. And then finally, try and fit in the brochure. You've got the timeline. We've got everything mapped out for your year. Please do take a look at these skill sessions. Term 1 is about skilling up. If this has kind of caught your imagination, this is about skilling up this term in amongst all the other stuff that you're doing, so that you'll be fully prepped in term 2 to really think about meeting with 1, 2, 3 different organizations to start sharing ideas and maybe coming up with a collaboration. So really, and I can't believe how kind of on time we are. It just remains for me to say thank you so much. Thank you again, Alan. Do get in touch. You can make a one-on-one appointment with me. And thank you again to Jim and Provost Michael Spence for their filmed contributions today. And I really look forward to seeing any staff who are here, organizations, and also students as part of CRIS 2021. So thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks. Bye-bye, Anne.